Warning disclaimer: the following story is a fictional narrative inspired by ghost tales, Southern folklore, and the cultural legacy of Dolly Parton. It is not based on real events, nor does it claim to represent Dolly Parton's actual life, beliefs, or experiences. All characters, locations, and events are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. This story contains supernatural themes, suspense, and eerie moments intended for entertainment purposes only. Dolly remembered her mama once telling her, "Some parts of these mountains are best left alone." But that was long ago, and she was no longer the scared little girl huddled by the fireplace. She was Dolly Parton, unshakable, full of faith, and fearless. The drive up to the property was steep and winding. Her SUV groaned as it climbed the gravel road carved between thick trees and overgrown brush. As she approached the cabin inside, the furniture was antique, covered in white sheets that had yellowed with time. Cobwebs hung in the corners, and an old rocking chair faced the fireplace, as if waiting for someone to return. Dolly lit a lantern and started exploring. The bedroom was modest, with a four-post. Back inside, the fireplace crackled as she settled in the rocking chair. On a whim, she started humming the lullaby, the same one she thought she'd just heard. It was a tune her mama used to sing to her when storms rolled in over the holler. "Hush now, darlin', don't you cry, Mama's here to sing you bye." As she sang the second line, the fire sputtered. The room grew colder. The rocking chair groaned beneath her, swaying ever so slightly. Dolly stopped humming. Then, from the far corner of the room, she heard it. A whisper. Not a word, not a voice. Just breath. Cold and slow. She froze. "Hello," she called. No answer. The air thickened. Her skin prickled with goosebumps. She reached for the lantern, but before her hand could touch it, the flame flickered violently, then went out, plunging the room into darkness. Only the red glow of dying embers lit the fireplace. Dolly stood slowly. Her heart thudded in her chest. She moved toward the bedroom, where she had left her flashlight. As she stepped into the hallway, the floorboards creaked. She sat up slowly and reached for the flashlight she'd left on the nightstand. It flickered once, then died, even though she'd just changed the batteries the day before. Something wasn't right. She walked into the living room, half expecting the photograph from last night to be gone. But it was still there, its scratched-out eyes glaring at her. And the word "welcome" was now smudged, as if a hand had wiped it halfway clean. Determined not to let fear control her, Dolly decided to investigate. She rummaged through the cabin, looking for any logical explanation, maybe a prank, an old settler's diary, something to make sense of what was happening. In a storage trunk beneath the stairs, she found a dusty tape recorder and a few unlabeled cassettes. Most were blank or filled with static, but one stood out. Written in faded ink were the words, "Don't play after dark." Curiosity overrode caution. She loaded the tape and hit play. At first, it was just static. Then a faint voice emerged, soft, almost childlike, singing the very same lullaby Dolly had heard in the woods. Her skin tingled. The voice didn't sound malicious. In fact, it sounded almost familiar. But as the song played on, there was something underneath the melody, a low whisper. She replayed the tape and cranked up the volume. This time, she heard it clearly. "Get out while you still can." Dolly's heart pounded. The voice beneath the lullaby didn't belong to a child. It was something older, colder. She ripped the tape out and tossed it aside. But the melody didn't stop. It continued faintly from the hallway. After a few minutes, she reached a small clearing where an old, weathered gravestone sat crooked in the earth. Moss covered most of the inscription, but she could still make. There was no breeze. No windows open. No logical explanation. Suddenly, the rocking chair halted, and the room went still. Dolly's phone screen froze. The recording app crashed. She restarted it and checked the playback. The lullaby was there, soft, sorrowful, but at the end of the recording was something new. A second voice, raspy, low, and right next to the microphone, whispered, "You've been gone too long, Eleanor." Dolly dropped the phone. The air in the room turned ice cold. She looked into the mirror above the dresser and saw her own reflection, but it was smiling when she wasn't. She backed away slowly, praying, whispering hymns under her breath. The reflection didn't follow her movements. It stared at her, head tilted slightly, smile frozen on its face. And then it mouthed 3 silent words, "Don't leave me." Dolly ran outside into the night, her breath clouding in front of her. The forest watched her. Every branch seemed to stretch toward her like arms. Somewhere in the dark, the lullaby started again, louder than before. It wasn't just one voice this time, it was a chorus. Children. Women. Maybe even her own. Something had been waiting here. Something that remembered. And now it had found its voice. Dolly lit every oil lamp she could find and kept the fire roaring. She refused to let the darkness win. But despite her best efforts, she couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching her. At exactly midnight, as if summoned by an invisible hand, the storm calmed. No rain, no thunder, no wind. Just an eerie, heavy silence. That's when she heard it. Creak. The front door. Dolly sat upright on the couch, eyes locked on the wooden hallway that led to the entrance. She hadn't left it unlocked. Slowly she rose, gripping the fireplace poker tightly in her hand. Her heartbeat sounded like thunder in her ears as she tiptoed toward the hallway. The lamps flickered one by one as she passed them, as if reacting to her movement or warning her. She reached the door. It was wide open. Rain puddles spread across the wooden floor, despite the fact that the storm had stopped. Dolly scanned the porch, shining her flashlight into the darkness. Nothing. The forest beyond was still, but every hair on her body stood on edge. She started to shut the door when she noticed something odd, muddy footprints on the floorboards, leading not out but into the cabin. Small. Barefoot. Like a child's. They led from the door to the base of the stairs. She slowly followed them, feeling the dread build with every step. At the bottom of the stairs was a small, silver object round and glinting in the dim light. Dolly knelt and picked it up. It was a locket. When she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Inside was a black and white photo of her mother as a young girl, and beside her, another girl with dark eyes and a face Dolly had never seen before. Etched into the back of the locket were the initials EP Eleanor Parton. A gust of cold wind whooshed down the stairs, and the bedroom door above slammed shut. Dolly jumped, heart in her throat. "This ain't happening," she whispered to herself, clutching the locket tightly. But deep inside, she knew it was real. She wasn't dreaming. This wasn't imagination. Something had entered her home. And it wasn't leaving. She took a shaky step up the stairs, the creaking echoing like drum beats through the silence. The hallway upstairs was darker than it should have been, even with the flashlight. Shadows stretched too long, bending around corners like living things. She opened the bedroom door and was hit by a cold gust of air that extinguished her lamp in a blink. The flashlight flickered, then died. She stood frozen in the pitch black. And then tap, tap, tap. Footsteps. Tiny ones. From behind her. She turned sharply, breath catching in her chest. The hallway was empty. She reached for the matches in her pocket and lit a new oil lamp. Its glow revealed the end of the hallway, and a figure standing there. A girl. In a white nightgown. Wet hair clinging to her face. Mud coating her bare feet. Her head was tilted down, but her eyes peeked up dark hollow, gleaming with something unnatural. Her lips curled into a slow, unsettling smile. Dolly stepped back, mouth dry, unable to find her voice. The girl lifted one finger to her lips. "S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H," she whispered. And then, she turned and vanished into the wall. Vanished. Not walked. Not ran. Vanished. Dolly collapsed to her knees, clutching the locket to her chest. Tears streamed down her face, not just from fear, but from a deep, ancestral grief that she didn't understand. That night, she didn't sleep. And for the first time in her life, she was too scared to sing. After the terrifying encounter with the ghostly girl, Dolly knew she had to uncover the truth behind the restless spirit haunting her family's cabin. The mysterious locket and the apparition had stirred something ancient and unresolved, something buried deep in her family's past. With determination, She began searching the cabin for any clues that might explain the curse that had found its way into her life. Accused by the townspeople of witchcraft and dark magic, she was shunned, mocked, and feared. The entries told of secret gatherings in the woods, whispered rituals meant to protect her family from curses and evil spirits. Despite her efforts, Eleanor was arrested and ultimately executed by hanging. Before her death, she vowed vengeance against those who condemned her and warned that her spirit would not rest until justice was served. As Dolly read deeper, she found references to a mysterious ritual meant to bind Eleanor's restless spirit, a ritual that had apparently failed or was never completed. Among the letters, she discovered correspondence between Eleanor and a man named Samuel, a local healer and her secret confidant. There was also a yellowed parchment with instructions for the ritual, written in shaky handwriting. But the ritual required something precious, a sacrifice of love, faith, and forgiveness. Dolly knew it wouldn't be easy. She also knew she couldn't do it alone. That evening, she reached out to a local historian and spiritual guide named Clara, a woman versed in Appalachian lore and the supernatural. Clara agreed to help and arrived the next day, bringing candles, herbs, and books of ancient rites. Together, they examined the artifacts and prepared to perform the ritual. But first, Dolly needed to gather strength to confront the shadows of her family's past and the spirit that refused to rest. As night fell, Dolly sat by the fire, clutching the locket and staring into the flames. The cabin seemed alive with whispers, voices carried on the wind, telling stories of love, loss, and longing. She realized this was more than a haunting, it was a plea for understanding, a chance for healing. In the quiet of that smoky mountain night, Dolly made a silent promise. She would face whatever darkness lingered in the cabin and lay the restless spirit to rest, for Eleanor, for her family, and for herself. After days of preparing for the ritual, Dolly began to feel an unsettling shift within herself. At first, it was subtle, a lingering tiredness that no amount of rest could cure, and fleeting moments of disorientation. But soon, those small disturbances grew into something more alarming. She started experiencing blackouts, losing time in stretches of minutes or even hours with no memory of what had happened. Friends who called or stopped by noticed strange changes in her demeanor, a distant look in her eyes, an unfamiliar coldness in her voice. One evening, while trying to read through Eleanor's journals again, Dolly suddenly felt an overwhelming wave of nausea and dizziness. Her vision blurred, and she gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. When the fog cleared, she realized she was no longer in control of her own voice. Words she hadn't spoken spilled from her lips, dark, haunting verses that echoed Eleanor's cries of anguish and vengeance. The music she instinctively composed grew eerily somber and full of grief, unlike anything she had ever written before. She tried to shake it off as exhaustion or stress, but deep down, Dolly knew something darker was at play. Her reflection in the mirror no longer felt like her own. Some mornings, she would catch a glimpse of herself, but with eyes that seemed hollow and distant, almost like they belonged to someone else. On nights when the moon was full, she swore the reflection moved independently, sometimes lingering a moment too long, a subtle, sinister smile curling on its lips when Dolly's own remained neutral or frightened. The boundary between her identity and the restless spirits grew thinner by the day. At times, her dreams became vivid possessions of Eleanor's memories, the cold stone cell where Eleanor had been held, the hateful faces of the townsfolk accusing her, the final moments before her execution. Dolly would wake drenched in sweat, her arms and legs marked with bruises and scratches she couldn't explain. Sometimes, she awoke to find her clothes torn or disheveled, as if some invisible struggle had taken place while she slept. Friends began to worry. Clara, the spiritual guide, urged Dolly to take a break and seek professional help. But Dolly felt compelled to stay and fight, determined to find a way to free both herself and Eleanor's trapped soul. One chilling night, as a storm raged outside, Dolly sat in the rocking chair by the fireplace, clutching the silver locket tightly. She began to sing the lullaby again, softly at first, then louder, pouring every ounce of love and sorrow into the melody. As her voice filled the cabin, the air grew cold, and a shadowy figure emerged from the corner of the room. It was Eleanor. But she was different now, no longer a frightened girl or vengeful spirit, but a sorrowful, transparent woman reaching out with pleading eyes. Dolly's voice faltered, but she continued singing, allowing the spirit to flow through her. For a moment, they were two souls intertwined by blood, pain, and hope. Suddenly, the room was filled with whispers, ghostly voices chanting softly, joining the lullaby. Dolly felt a presence trying to overtake her, a force both desperate and dangerous. Her vision blurred as if she was slipping away. In that terrifying moment, she fought back, summoning all her strength, faith, and willpower. Her voice grew stronger, louder, and purer. The shadow recoiled and dissipated like smoke in the wind. Exhausted, Dolly collapsed into the rocking chair, tears streaming down her face. She knew the possession wasn't over, it was a battle that would take time and courage. But for the first time, she felt she had the power to reclaim herself and help Eleanor find the peace they both desperately needed. Dolly knew she couldn't face the restless spirit alone any longer. The possession episodes were becoming more intense, and the ghost's presence in the cabin was stronger than ever. Desperate for answers and protection, she reached out to Clara, the spiritual guide, who recommended contacting a well-known medium in the nearby town, Madame Laya. Known for her ability to communicate with spirits and guide them toward the light, Madame Laya was the last hope to break the curse haunting Dolly's family. On a misty evening, Madame Laya arrived at the cabin, carrying an assortment of candles, crystals, and ritual tools wrapped in a worn velvet bag. Her calm presence was reassuring, but Dolly couldn't shake her own apprehension. The cabin felt colder than usual, and shadows seemed to flicker in the corners of her vision. After setting up a small altar in the living room, Madame Laya explained the process. They would conduct a seance to invite Eleanor's spirit into the circle, listen to her story, and offer her peace. Dolly, Clara, and Madame Laya joined hands around the table, surrounded by flickering candles. The medium began chanting softly, her voice rising and falling in hypnotic rhythms. The room grew unnaturally cold. The flames danced wildly, casting eerie shapes on the walls. Suddenly, a heavy presence filled the space, a mixture of sorrow, anger, and desperation. The candles flickered out, plunging the room into darkness except for the faint glow of the altar's crystals. A spectral figure materialized before them, Dolly Parton. Her face was pale and haunted, eyes filled with both pain and fury. She spoke without words, her emotions pouring through the medium's voice. Eleanor revealed the tragic truth of her death, how she had been falsely accused, betrayed by those she trusted, and condemned without justice. Her spirit had lingered, trapped by rage and sorrow, seeking release, but unsure how to find it. As the seance continued, the atmosphere grew increasingly intense. Suddenly, a violent force surged through the room. The table shook violently, and the candles reignited, bursting into flames that seemed to roar. Dolly and Clara clung to each other as the medium was thrown backward across the room, landing hard against the wall. The spirit's anger had been unleashed. Madame Laya struggled to regain control, chanting louder, calling on protective spirits to calm Eleanor's torment. Slowly, the presence began to soften, and the room's temperature returned to normal. The ghostly figure faded into a gentle glow before disappearing completely. Madame Laya lay on the floor, gasping but conscious. She warned Dolly that the spirit's pain was deep and that the journey to peace would be long and challenging. The seance had revealed the depth of Eleanor's suffering and the strength of the curse binding her. Dolly felt a renewed sense of purpose. She understood that she was connected to Eleanor not just by blood but by fate. The curse was intertwined with her family's history, and only by facing the past could she hope to break free. That night, Dolly lay awake listening to the wind whisper through the trees. The lullaby returned once more, but this time it was softer, less threatening, a haunting reminder of the path ahead. She knew she had to be strong, for herself and for the restless spirit begging for redemption. Back in Nashville, Dolly felt a mixture of relief and dread. She thought leaving the cabin and returning to the city would bring safety, a return to normalcy. The bright lights, cheering fans, and familiar rhythms of her music career were a comforting shield against the supernatural horrors she'd faced. But the past wasn't ready to let go. Her next big concert was scheduled at the Grand Ole Opry, an iconic stage she had graced countless times. The anticipation was electric, a night of celebration, music, and joy. Yet beneath the surface, Dolly's nerves tangled with a quiet fear. Something was coming with her from the mountains. She could feel it, a shadow lurking just beyond the spotlight. As the crowd filled the auditorium, Dolly prepared backstage. She rehearsed her set list, trying to push away the memories of the cabin, the ghostly lullabies, and the relentless spirit she'd met. But as she stepped onto the stage, the atmosphere shifted. The lights flickered suddenly, plunging the arena into brief darkness before bursting back to life. A hush fell over the audience as a haunting melody began to echo through the speakers, the same lullaby Dolly had heard in the cabin, soft and sorrowful, filling every corner of the venue. At first, Dolly thought it was part of the show, a clever intro for her performance. But then the melody grew louder, more insistent. It was coming from the sound system itself, but no one behind the scenes seemed to know where it originated. As Dolly took the microphone, she felt an icy chill creep down her spine. The crowd's cheers faded into murmurs of confusion and unease. Then, suddenly, Dolly's voice changed. The clear, warm tone the audience loved was replaced by something cold, distant, and unfamiliar, a voice that seemed older, filled with sorrow and pain. She began singing lyrics she had never written, words of loss, betrayal, and longing, echoing Eleanor's story. The audience watched, captivated and frightened, as the once bright star seemed possessed by a force beyond understanding. Dolly's eyes glazed over, and she collapsed mid-song, whispering softly, "You must remember me." Backstage, the crew rushed to her aid, calling for medical help. But Dolly was conscious, aware of the ghostly presence inside her, battling for control. The news spread quickly. The star had been haunted on stage, overtaken by a spirit desperate to be heard. In the following days, Dolly withdrew from the public eye, seeking answers and healing. She understood that Eleanor's spirit had followed her, crossing the boundaries of life and death to confront her. The past and present were entwined, and the haunting was far from over. Dolly's music changed after that night, darker, more reflective, filled with the pain and hope of a soul fighting for peace. Fans noticed the shift, sensing the deeper story behind the songs. She knew the only way forward was to return to the cabin once more, to face the spirit directly and offer the forgiveness and love it so desperately needed. The weight of everything Dolly had endured pressed heavily on her as she prepared to return to the cabin one final time. The music that poured from her soul since the haunting on stage was a testament to the struggle between light and darkness she had lived through. Now, she was ready to face Eleanor's spirit fully, no more running, no more fear. It was time to bring peace, not only to the restless ghost, but to herself and the generations that had suffered before her. With Clara by her side, Dolly journeyed back to the Smoky Mountains. The cabin, though weathered and quiet, seemed different, almost expectant. The trees whispered secrets as they approached, and the air held the chill of years of sorrow. Inside, Dolly arranged the talismans, candles, and old letters in a sacred circle. She began playing the haunting lullaby softly on her guitar, letting the notes fill the room like a balm for the wounded spirit. As her voice lifted, memories flooded her mind, the faces of ancestors, the pain they endured, the love that refused to die. The air shifted. A gentle glow appeared near the fireplace, and Eleanor materialized once again, but this time without anger or fear. Her eyes were soft, filled with gratitude and longing. Dolly stepped forward, holding out the silver locket. "I've carried your story with me," Dolly said, voice trembling. "It's time to rest now. You don't have to suffer anymore." Eleanor reached for the locket, and as she touched it, a warmth spread through the room. The glow intensified, surrounding the spirit with light that seemed to heal centuries of pain. Slowly, Eleanor's form faded, leaving behind a calm silence. Outside, under the ancient tree where Dolly had first found the locket, she buried the letters and keepsakes with care. The earth seemed to breathe with her, releasing the weight of old curses and grief. The cabin no longer felt haunted, it felt alive with peace. In the weeks that followed, Dolly poured her heart into a new album, a collection of songs inspired by the journey she had undertaken, the love and loss, the haunting and the healing. Fans embraced the raw honesty, feeling the depth behind every lyric and melody. Though the ghost was gone, its mark remained, a reminder of the strength it takes to face the shadows and find light. Dolly knew she had honored her ancestors and herself, breaking the cycle of fear and giving a voice to the forgotten. As the sun set over the Smoky Mountains, Dolly sat on the cabin porch, guitar in hand, humming the lullaby one last time, this time, a song of hope, healing, and peace. 79.